Theresa May gambled and she's lost. Britain's general election has produced a stunning result. The ruling Conservative parties have actually lost their majority. Joining me here is Janan Ganesh. Janan, what went wrong for Mrs May?
A range of things. Number one, a policy on Brexit that was from the beginning very provocative, very hard, quite an extreme interpretation of a very close referendum result last June. Then during the campaign, a series of specific policy mistakes, most notably on social care, which she had to turn around on within a few days. But thirdly, something that was beyond her control really, the underrated, underestimated quality of the Labour campaign led by Jeremy Corbyn, my profession, me included, failed to see that coming. And I think that constellation of factors added up to really an borderline unrecoverably bad result for the Prime Minister.
We'll come to Mr Corbyn in a minute, but Mrs May proved to be a curiously wooden, if not brittle candidate, with a control freakery, some would say, akin to Mrs Clinton in last year's presidential campaign.
Yeah, the whole campaign has been hugely redolent of last November in America. A fairly limited politician, a workaday politician, essentially saying to the public, I'm not great, but look at the alternative. And that wasn't enough in November in the United States, and it wasn't enough this time. In many ways, what makes this worse is that Hillary Clinton didn't choose to call an election at a particular time. It was just a natural US political cycle. Theresa May chose to call an election in what was the tail end of April, because she was 24 points ahead in the opinion polls. She could have just governed with her existing majority all the way until 2020. So she picked this fight, and losing it or failing to win it is doubly worse because of that.
So in a nutshell, how did Jeremy Corbyn, supposedly of the hard left, a man who voted against his own party more than 500 times, who was supposedly going to take the country back to the 1970s, suddenly he's come out with the best result, bar 1997 for Labour, in 25 years?
In a nutshell, it's the youth turnout. Young voters told pollsters that they would turn out in huge numbers. The pollsters didn't believe them, which is perfectly understandable given the laggardliness of young voters in getting to the polls in last year's Europe referendum. On this occasion, they turned out in huge numbers. They were mobilised in part by Brexit, but also by specific policies to do with university tuition fees and Jeremy Corbyn's general personal style.
Right, so what does this mean for Brexit?
There is now a non-trivial chance that Brexit will be substantially softer. I would have said 24 hours ago that we were near certain to have a very hard exit, and Theresa May would win a big mandate for that. There's now doubt about that, and it's hard to specify what the deal eventually will look like. But there's things on the table which were absolutely not on the table a day ago.
Business is looking at the fact that negotiations with the EU 27 are about to begin in just over a week's time. And what can they expect? Is it now possible to argue that having access to the single market or being part of that or also the customs union is now back on the table?
It's not only possible to argue that, some Conservatives have already begun arguing that in public. Conservative MPs have begun to entertain the idea that actually after a 52-48 referendum last year, a relatively close one, and after an indecisive general election this year, something like EEA membership, in which Britain retains large aspects of single market membership in return for observing certain EU protocols and laws, is something that's possible in a way that it wasn't a few days ago.
Now, Mrs May said, trust me, give me in effect a blank check, I can handle these negotiations. After this result, can she survive?
I think she can survive a matter of months, but she's so wounded in terms of authority, moral authority, that really much beyond this year, I couldn't see her surviving. And the question that then becomes who takes over.
So just to close out, Janan, Britain was supposed to be, one of the most mature, advanced democracies, stability, rationality. We've just had the most shocking result on top of Brexit. What does this tell you about the state of British politics, and also perhaps, given Trump, Macron and Brexit in the first place, about democracy in the 21st century?
My best guess, and we'll spend years analysing these events, is that these are delayed reactions to the crash. It happened in 2007-8, had no immediate impact. Fairly conventional politicians kept getting elected, David Cameron, for example, twice. But it's taken a while, I think, for people to process the resentment. Incomes haven't kept pace with prices in a lot of countries, including Britain. And I think that accumulation of grievances has just roiled our politics and made it hugely volatile. And it could get more volatile. There is a prospect, if a viable government can't be formed in the coming days or weeks, that we have another election, which will be our third in about 18 months.
Janan Ganesh, thank you so much.